thank you so much for attending the Behind the Camera House's Lens on Change, Storytelling as Social Commentary panel. My name, again, is Marissa Hill, and I'm the executive producer of Shade Studios and also ShadeTV. And I'm so excited to talk to my panelists today because each of them actually have different projects premiering at Tribeca 2025. Give it up. It's a big deal. And this panel is basically going to explore how filmmakers use documentaries and narrative films as powerful tools for social commentary, driving conversation and inspiring change. So hopefully all of you will leave this panel inspired today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our different panelists. First up, from Esta, Isla, please welcome Alain, Emile. Who's also an amazing composer on this film. Next up, we've got Nick Bruckman over here on this side, who is the co-director of The Price of Milk. And thank you, Nick, for letting us use your incredible space today.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for coming.
And then we've got the amazing Shannon. So Shannon Burkett, you are actually doing a podcast.
I am.
Which is
Yes.
really, really cool. I never get to talk to podcasters on my panels. And it's called LED.
Yes, it's called LED. How the story ends is up to us. It's an advocacy piece. It's based on our true story of our family's experience with our son's lead poisoning. And we're actually trying to pass the Lead Paint Right to Know Act. And ironically, or actually serendipitously, our event on June 12th is the last day of voting in the Senate.
Ooh, okay, everyone, we got to get out there and vote.
Yep.
This is really huge. And last but not least, from In the Current of Being, please welcome Prateek, Rajagopal.
You got it.
Nailed the last name. Yes, I did it. All right, let's jump right into it. Nick, I'm going to start with you. Milk. Why did you decide to get into the topic of the Got Milk campaign and branding?
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming to People's TV and Behind the Camera House. I am a 90s kid, and so I grew up with the Got Milk commercials of that era, as I think anybody else, at least in the US, will remember. And you guys may remember that original commercial from 1993 where the guy is pouring himself a glass of milk, eating a brownie, and then gets a call that it's a contest, and he gets $10,000 if he can guess who shot Alexander Hamilton. And he knows it's Aaron Burr, but he can't get it out because he's got the brownie in his mouth and he doesn't have any milk. And what I didn't know is part of the reason that commercial maybe influenced me so much is because it was directed by none other than Michael Bay. But that's not the real reason that I got into filmmaking. I did it to deal with various social topics, and it turns out that milk is actually this like prism that you can look at everything in America through. Even this like simple drink reflects everything that's wrong with our agriculture system, how our schools function is deeply influenced by milk and the dairy industry, how fast food works, and how ultimately Congress and lobbying work, because the dairy industry is one of the most powerful lobbies in the US, which was how the Got Milk campaign was created. So in general, just talking about social change, political docs are really struggling the last couple of years, getting political films out. Social justice issue topic-driven movies are not working in the marketplace. And we thought this was like a fun pop culture way to explore them.
I love that. I know we've got some 90s babies out there. I saw some of you that saw that commercial. I know I was wearing the milk mustache. I was hoping you would have a milk mustache today.
We will at the premiere.
At the premiere! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that. Alain, your film takes place in Puerto Rico. Did they let you go to Puerto Rico?
I was born and raised there. So
oh, well,
I didn't,
like home. That's amazing. So clearly, did that influence your approach to the scoring of this story?
I think it influenced it in a way that I could just be myself. The directors are from the island. It was shot in the town that I was born and raised, and
wow.
they were as well. so there are people I met during the process that I know them back home, and it just gave me, I think the story and the visuals gave me the freedom to just interpret the story as my own, and without feeling like I'm pretending or copying anyone. It was just a very freeing process to just be able to draw from my own experiences, and whatever comes out was going to be authentic.
I mean, you're born there.
Yeah,
That's
it was
crazy.
literally on the streets. That was shot on the streets that I was, which I've never seen in Puerto Rican films.
And that wasn't planned, of course.
No,
You just so happen to be from that area and region.
Correct.
Wow, what a crazy small world.
Yeah, so that was a rare occurrence where, a lot of times you get directions to maybe, this is the style, this is the culture or the genre, and this was very open and just very collaborative.
So was this probably one of your favorite projects, just based on the fact that it is
Yeah,
from?
not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but it's actually my favorite.
Not doing favoritism here, but I had to pull it out of you.
It was seamless. So it was one of my favorite projects because I felt like I respect their work, I respect the film, I respect the story, I related to it, and I'm really proud of the work that came out.
Love that. Shannon, what compelled you to turn to this very personal and painful experience into a scripted podcast?
In 2023, my son and I had been doing a lot of lobbying. We were able to help other organizations pass 3 laws, including the Lead Pipe Right to Know Act. In 2024, all these organizations, we put all our eggs into the Lead Paint Right to Know Act versus the Lead Pipe Right to Know Act, and it didn't pass in 2024. And it's one of those bills that would have made all the difference in our case. So I decided that we needed to tell our story, try to inspire people to action, because in our lobbying, we noticed that you can sit there and say all the facts and figures that you want, but you can see the staffers kind of glaze over, even though they can be very devastating stats. But when you put a face, when you put a human being to those numbers, it changes everything. And so we wanted to make this podcast so that we could put it out there and really try to educate and inspire and get people to please call their representatives. And actually our website, you can go to endleadpoisoning.org and you can sign the letter that sends it to key representatives.
I love that. There's definitely not a lot of information out there on lead poisoning, because when I think of my childhood as kids, I know some of you probably did this as well, but we thought if we touched a pencil that we would get lead poisoning.
Yeah,
that was honestly a thing. We would all hold it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to tell my mom
Yeah,
today that I have lead poisoning. But
Yeah.
I mean, it really is kind of the basis, though, to really streamline that there isn't really much information out there.
No, it's unfortunately it's a very under-researched disease, and 800 million children in the world, according to UNICEF, have lead poisoning. That's 1 out of 3. Almost half the children in the South Pacific have lead poisoning. New York State is the #1 state for lead poisoning cases in the country because we have the oldest housing. The reason why you don't hear about it as much is because it often happens to a disenfranchised population. It often happens in poorer areas where the houses are breaking down, where the landlords can take advantage of these people. And they're basically afraid to go against their landlord or say anything, because then when they go to find a new place, they're known as the people that cause a problem.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Prateek, you're kind of a big deal. I was looking you up. You've composed some stuff on
that.
Trolls, on Creed 3, Mandalorian, just to
Thank
name a
you,
few. This project, though, that you have submitted to Tribeca is completely different.
Yeah.
I saw some images. I honestly wish I could show you a photo of what this kind of VR experience looks like. But it's haptic technology that you use for this film.
Yeah.
How was it different from the other projects that you've worked on, going into this direction of really getting that full physical experience
Yeah.
while, viewing this very emotional and personal story?
That's a beautiful question. Working in VR is clearly it's a new technology, and it's very different from film and TV in the sense that with VR, like you said, you're physically experiencing things, and it's audio, it's video, there's a narrative, but there's also like a haptic quest. And in this particular project, it's like, it's about conversion therapy and what you have to go through, what people go through, and it's such a barbaric practice. And so we try, like Cameron, the director, he tried to really make it a visceral and intense experience, which you experience like physically, but also visually. And with the music, I think my approach was to, I have a band background, like I have a death metal background, and it's like, how do you channel like a lot of that into the experience, something like this, where you're trying to honestly tell a pretty brutal story. And so it's metaphorically like when you're on stage, you're smashing the string, you're trying to like almost break it, Sometimes how do you take that and really push it in this technology, because you don't get that kind of freedom in film and TV sometimes. And so yeah, that was kind of the process.
It's a full body experience.
Yeah, it's
completely.
a full body experience with all the ebbs and flows, and I think it's beautiful storytelling as well.
You haven't seen the behind the scenes and just the look and feel of the VR glasses, and you're wearing a complete full vest as well.
Yeah.
So you're literally, it's not just visual. I mean, you're feeling everything and taking it in while watching the whole experience, which is so cool. Technology.
Yeah, it's like getting cooler and cooler, and I think just the way you can tell stories is truly, I think we are at the cusp, with like AI and stuff too. Mm-hmm. It's always been there, like everyone's been talking about these technologies, but now like film festivals are truly like pushing it as well. Like we were also at Cannes, and it's just the second year of immersive competition at Cannes. So
you won at South by as well.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little brag over here.
Yeah.
I want to open this next question up to each of you. What role does your own identity or lived experience play in shaping the way that you approach stories of social change? Alan's like,
I think that, having been raised in Puerto Rico, I feel like you grew up with a chip on your shoulder. You live in a colony. Your peers can't vote for your president. So you grew up with a certain just animosity that I think it's less about how do you tap into that for these type of projects, and it's more of like how do you tap out of that for the projects that don't need it. Because I feel like you carry that. I mean, at least me personally, I carry a certain anger, and if in the story there's like a certain, there's a reminder of it, you gotta pull back. I want to hit the string as hard as possible, but then you're like, not the time. And I worked a couple of documentaries recently that I did have the opportunity to embrace it, but at the time, that could reflect in something softer. It could reflect. It's like, how do you feel about it? Just putting it into notes versus, and just holding back the, wanting to actually play something as hard as possible to get it out of your system. But I feel like if it's genuine and you're following the story, then you're able to sort of feel like you said the right words without having to scream.
Yeah, so I think, I'm a third culture kid. I grew up in the Middle East in Oman, and then I lived in India for many years in Mumbai, one of the most populated cities in the world, and now I've been in the States for 7 years. And I think I've truly, like, with my background, like my cultural background, but also my musical background, I've worked with all kinds of people, different shapes and sizes and identities, and like, I think when you come together creatively, like all of that's thrown out of the window. And I've really been around that. So I feel like blessed that that it's easy for me to bring that sense of, that third culture awareness into the nuance of like projects like these, and just like being non-judgmental and like looking at people from a creative lens, because everyone has it, especially in what we do. So yeah.
We've got such diversity on our panel.
It's hard to speak up.
I know. I mean, for me, it's like I grew up in New Jersey on Wonder Bread and Oscar Mayer, like sandwiches. It's not that exciting, but I will say that as a woman, I do believe that and again, I don't love using this word, but the burden of taking care of a sick child often falls on the woman. And a woman can be advocating for her sick child over and over again, and it falls on deaf ears. And she often has like a innate intuition, like this is what's wrong with my kid. And for various reasons, I think it's really ingrained in society that we ignore that. And also that there's a part in it when I talk about how it affected my career as an actor. I chose to become a nurse when my son was sick when he was little, and I was gonna cut that out because I was like, all right, I don't want that to like sound too like, you know, poor me, like I made this sacrifice or whatever. But then when I was in, you know, a friend of mine read it, and she has a son who's autistic, and she was like, oh, please don't cut that. Don't cut that. Because, you know, when a woman or a caretaker has a sick child, when they have a loved one who has special needs, it affects your entire life. And I don't think that people really understand the sacrifices and the lack of help that's out there.
Love that.
Directing documentaries, I think I'm biracial. My mom's family is Indian, my father's family is Jewish American. But I think there was for like a long time, initially there was this thing of documentaries being like inherently pretty colonial and extractive, and that goes back to like the early documentaries like Nanook of the North, where they like went into indigenous cultures and shot a bunch of footage of them and then brought it back for like Western consumption and gaze, and that went on for, you know, 80 years and was bad and not conducive to people being empowered to tell their own stories. And then I think for a couple of years there was kind of the sort of like, I guess what people are now calling woke, sort of like inversion of that, where only people from that culture were allowed, like you could only make a film about black people if you were black, you could only make a film about disabilities if you were black. And I think like we're now entering a new like third rail that is exciting. I've, you know, made films about disability, about immigration, and about, you know, films in India, but I'm only, you know, a quarter Indian. Like I'm not sure if that, I made a film in Kashmir, which is on the on the wall there. Was I allowed to make that? You know, I think these things are very nuanced, and I encourage people to think about the connection they have to their story and their subjects or participants in film. We don't call them subjects anymore, going back to that colonial problem. And can you have a real authentic connection and a reason to be telling their story beyond just the fact that you have the same skin color, or because you're the same gender? You know, can a male lens on topics around birth justice be useful? And or conversely, can the perspective of somebody without a disability on a community of folks who are disabled, or vice versa, be useful and relevant? And so I'm hopeful that that conversation is like advancing in a way that people don't feel inhibited to make films about things because they're not.
They don't feel like they fit in a specific category.
Yeah, and I think it's something to be aware of, but I personally encourage people to make films that they should be telling because they believe that that story can advance some kind of outcome or reach audiences or touch them in some way that will move the needle on that topic that you care about, not just because you have this shared lived experience. Actually, I think your differentials from the person or community that you're filming could actually be really additive, and the dynamic between filmmaker and participant could be more interesting than if they're both from the exact same community. So I think you have to like balance those two things, and that's something I've been thinking a lot about. For example, this milk project is about farms, and I think I was a good person to make this film because I like barely ever stepped on a farm in my entire life and grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
I was going to tell everyone that we also have a farmer here.
Exactly. Well, we will. Yeah, we're going to have a farmer come. It's going to be
one.
their first time in New York City, which is really exciting. Having them on the red carpet, you'll be there. But I think my perspective, trying to reach other people in urban environments about what's going on with the agricultural system might have made me a better storyteller for that than somebody who's a farmer. And so maybe not. I don't know for
You
sure.
have a different lens,
yeah,
which
that's
is
it.
it's nice to have that variety.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's what I was thinking about when you asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan, as far as your film goes, there's a strong sense of class tension, social commentary throughout the storyline. How did you approach scoring those political and emotional undercurrents without kind of overpowering the characters' personal journeys?
Yeah, I mean, I think you sort of focus on, it's easier to focus on what the character's going through versus what you want, the audience to, take away from it. I feel like you can get caught up in, this moment is important to, maybe teach the audience something about history that's important or something that's a current event that's important. And I think for me, in the pre-production process and in the spotting sessions, I like to just focus on, whose point of view are we, scoring, are we telling right now? And that allows me to sort of find that confined space that I can just put put myself in their shoes, as opposed to just express what I would like to focus on. And again, it's like it's hard sometimes not to speak up. And there's moments where if I feel like we need to push it somehow because it's important, then I will, I usually try to work on something and then I show it, and then if you don't like it, I'll do the other part. So that way it's it's a little easier to show, but I try to pick my battles because I want to stay true to the character's journey of the story, and and when we have the option to push in order to convey a certain message, then that's very welcome. But I try to stay in the character's perspective.
Yeah, you've got some interesting character development in there where you've got some lower class brothers who love to party. They live in some nice affordable housing, and one of them ends up falling in love with a girl who is in the upper echelon class of society. Did that kind of change the scoring elements of the depiction of these characters as they're developing? How did you kind of navigate that?
That's so common back home.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, your best friend had a whole different life than you did. And maybe not my best friend, but a lot of people's best friends.
Got it.
And you would meet people out, and then the second that you sort of take a step further, you realize that they have a very different life. And I think that again, they are both sort of united by this idea of, one feels like they need to leave the island in order to progress. The other feels like they're going to leave, but they don't want to. So there's a certain love for the island that, that's what sort of brings them together. And one of them is explaining, their sort of combating point of views. But their journey through the island sort of then negates their different classes. And it's more about just sort of survival and, the topographic and, aspect of the film. So it was a lot easier to sort of not necessarily convey the different class differences, but focus on what unites them, and it was like either the passion to I love this place but I gotta leave, or I gotta leave but I love this place. Mm-hmm. So it's it was a lot easier to focus on.
Tug of war a little bit. I love that about the storyline. Shannon, Lead blends narrative storytelling with political urgency. How did you strike a balance between drama and advocacy to keep listeners both engaged and informed?
I think that was a concern of mine. Because I have so many facts always in my head about this, that I didn't want it to sound just like a pamphlet. So I just really tried to stay true to the actual story and the emotional arcs of the characters. And I feel that is actually, when we're able to draw the audience in, when they care about us, when they care about my son, then they can feel the effects of lead on him just like we did. And I think that's the most important, to have the audience feel the pain that this family goes through, that this child goes through, and so that they can look and say, you know what, I'm just gonna turn on and I'm just gonna send those 5 emails, because lead is actually one of those things that can be eradicated. We actually can take care of it. We can actually, not too far in the future, look back and go, oh, remember when kids were lead poisoned? Oh, that really stunk. And so I just think that by making people care about this family, that's my job, and that's how I'll achieve the advocacy.
It's very relatable because I think back to jury duty. I know, not so fun time in life, but every single case I went to was lead,
Yeah.
and it was on Long Island, and I had no clue that that was such an issue until I had, to go and listen to these cases and hear all these stories. But I really do feel like this is the perfect time for this message to really be kind of catapulted out there for others to really understand that it is a major issue, and it's something so simple that doesn't have to happen.
No, it's 100% preventable, and you make a good point too, in that, if somebody had walked in and taken a baseball bat and beat my kid's head in, they would go to jail. But somebody can poison him, and he can have the same effect, the same traumatic brain injury, and they can just have their insurance pay out a lawsuit. So it's, when you want to talk about divide in this country, it's payoffs, and it's not a deterrent. It's not.
Well, and a lot of the individuals, they weren't even alive. The cases that we're going through, not one person was actually living, which was crazy.
People don't realize that people do die of lead poisoning. Children have swallowed toys, and then the other thing too is that it's really hard when a child is diagnosed. You don't know where it's coming from. It is detective work, and that's why this bill is so important, because it took us a whole month to figure out where Cooper's lead exposure was coming from. In that month, he lost the ability to speak, respond to his name, pointing, waving, in that 1 month. And if we had a registry and we had known there was lead in our building, that would have cut down our detective time, and he might not have had such severe side effects.
Nick, investigative journalism definitely plays a bit of a role in your process. How did you balance fact-finding with compelling storytelling?
Story of Milk is also full of thousands of facts and some that are extremely interesting and compelling. For example, it wasn't actually milk on their mustache, it was yogurt. But
the truth comes out. It was yogurt this whole time.
Because it is the consistency to stay on the lip for long enough for Annie Leibovitz, who shot that campaign too. We balance the fun stuff like that with all of the actual legislative facts about how the dairy industry became the most powerful industry in America. And we did a lot of research. The protagonists of the story are actually journalists who are trying to dig in to where the milk money is coming from. And so the story follows how, as Americans stopped drinking milk, the government tried to do whatever it possibly could to save the dairy industry. And originally that was just giving it to poor people, so they bought it up from the farmers and they made what we all know as government cheese, which is when they gave big blocks of cheese to the poor. Subsequently, once that sort of ran its course, what they figured out to do is put cheese elsewhere, like fast food. And so things that we think of as sort of organic, not organic, but real or authentic products, most famously the stuffed crust pizza, but additionally things like the Taco Bell quesalupa, cheese at the shell, brought to you by the US government at the behest of the dairy lobby in partnership with Taco Bell, placing scientists, government scientists in the fast food companies. And this kind of thing plays out in other industries as well, and we kind of make the point that it's bigger than milk. Milk is just a fun way to look at this. But what we did is follow journalists who were investigating all this and uncovering it. And from a legislative standpoint, one of the main pieces of legislation that the film argues and has been going through the Senate and House, it's sort of parallel to the lead thing, is that at least people should know how the USDA spends its money, and that some of these things should be transparent and not require tons of FOIA requests trying to get blacked out. There's we show blacked out documents between Pizza Hut and the USDA that are it's the silliest thing ever, but it shows how the whole mechanics of the industry work. And so transparency, I think, is a big part of what the mission is. And we found some great journalists who are doing that work. I think documentary filmmaking is different from journalism, and that's a whole other topic that we can talk about another time, as Andrew said, not to talk about it too much.
I love the journalism element, though, seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think it adds a little bit of extra depth. And this whole Pizza Hut thing with the stuffed crust.
Yeah.
What?
So you can't, one thing I'll just say is it's okay to drink milk, and we're going to have all different options of flavors at our premiere party to choose
I was
from.
like, did you bring some milk
From
for us
dairy
today?
to non-dairy at the premiere. To wait, but you know, one thing that I think we advocate for in this show in particular is that this is not a consumer choice issue. This is not about like going and drinking, you know, buying what you buy at the supermarket. And again, I don't think it's about like, oh, just make sure you live in a house where there's no lead in it. It's about like concerted collective action to transform society. But going back to how you do it, like for us, it was like stuff it into a stuffed crust pizza and like hope people get that message while taking a bite of like an otherwise really fun and silly documentary, because people are just not here for like straight up activism these days in their film consumption habits. Like we're hoping people will come back and be like, oh, I want to watch that like Got Milk thing, and then they're gonna like take the Matrix pill and go down. So that's our
Never
that's
to
our
look at milk again.
Yeah.
No, that's not what you want. Well,
Yeah.
I love the balance. It's perfect. It's like the perfect combination. Prateek, I would love to know about some challenges and even some opportunities when composing for a VR type environment, what it presents, especially when paired with such an intimate and traumatic narrative.
I think like working in VR versus like film and TV, right? Like in films or documentaries, you're kind of, as a composer specifically, like you come in pretty much at the end of the process or towards the end. And so you have the visuals, you have the story, you have the colors, you have like the acting, everything's there. And so you sometimes tend to like fall into cliches of what you feel like things should sound like or what beats to hit. And it's almost like restricts you as a composer and as an artist. But I feel like in VR, it's only opportunities. Truly, like you have to push the boundaries as much as you can.
Are you testing it out like firsthand
Oh,
as
yeah,
you're doing it too?
Yeah, like Cameron and I, we start very early in the process, and because he's so musical, like he kind of guides his story and everything with demos and suites that I send him. So he'll like call me in very early in the process, and he'll be like, hey, can you send me some piece of music? And then he'll put it in to like a rough idea of, you know, what he has, and then when I watch it down, I'll give him feedback too. So yeah, basically it's a lot of opportunity, and you know, like you said, it's an intimate story, but it's also like very brutal, and it's, you know, it's deeply like, it's trauma for anybody who has to go through conversion therapy just because of identity or gender. And so
the storyline is about electroshock therapy,
Yeah, so
and this is a true story about a real case survivor.
Exactly,
So
Caroline.
you're actually feeling what it feels like to have that shock happening to your body,
100%.
correct?
Yeah. So
Very scary.
Caroline, she's based out of the UK. So Cameron, the director, you know, he just had a Zoom conversation with her and recorded the entire Zoom conversation, cut it down just a little bit, but built the entire project around it. And so, yeah, it's like, you know, in the moments where it has to be, where you're actually feeling the shock, you have to like really amp it up, amp everything up, including the music. And then when things are super delicate and intimate, you have to like really tone it down. So, but I feel like the ceiling is even, like the difference is even more than you would for film, because you're also like, you're not feeling anything, you're not hearing much, and you know, but then all of a sudden like everything comes together and you just feel all these extreme emotions. So I feel like it's a lot of opportunity working in this space more than challenges, which I think is beautiful for people like us, right, who love to shine a light on what we do.
Mm-hmm.
as
This actually
artists.
goes directly into my next question, which I want to open up to each of you, is the feeling and the emotions that you want the audience to leave with after, listening to your podcast or watching your films. Clearly, with VR, it's going to be a completely different feeling. I mean, you're feeling it all over your body, literally, when you're walking out. What do you hope through the composition that you've added to this that the audience will kind of leave through that experience?
I think the great thing about working with fantastic collaborators like Cam is they really encourage and push music. And so, music aside, even just the storytelling, I think it's, you gotta come out feeling something.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people leave the project, they can't handle what they're going through, they haven't confronted, their own thoughts, morals, principles, and so they leave the project midway. And so I think what I hope, and I'm sure Cameron does too, is like whether you feel a positive emotion or a negative emotion or discomfort or comfort, you feel seen, as long as you feel some emotion coming out of this, I think that's the goal. Because clearly it's a barbaric practice, and I think, whatever it is.
It's crazy to be experiencing that firsthand, though.
100%,
I mean, everyone will experience that today now. I wish that'd be pretty cool if we had some VR glasses right now. But electroshock therapy, my goodness, to actually visualize it, see it happening while experiencing it is 100%. Just so futuristic. And I love that you have taken on a project like this.
Yeah, and it's like, if how much ever you try and get as extreme as you want in a project like this, it's still never going to be the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you everyone's trying to push as much as they can, and even then it's not going to be the real thing. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
just a touch, a little taste, essentially, of it.
Absolutely.
As far as emotions that each of you would like to leave feeling.
I would love for people to finish the podcast feeling empowered. I want to give them the emotion that, you can go through these things and you can come out the other side and you can try to make the world a better place. One of the things that I think is sort of dominating our sphere right now is that there's just terrible people everywhere. And what this podcast does, go into is there are everyday angels that come out of nowhere in your most desperate hour, and they help you, and they are there, and there's so many of us, and I just want the audience to feel that when they leave. I want them to feel the power that they have, feel the community, and know that together we can make change.
Yeah, I think Roger Ebert said that cinema is the great empathy engine, and I feel like it's one of the few mediums that allow you to walk in people's shoes for 90 minutes. I mean, it's the haptic and VR stuff is interesting because they're adding an extra dimension to walking in somebody's shoes, right? Because soon you'll be able to actually feel like the contours of the soul. But in terms of driving people to take action, I remember I was in college and I saw Michael Moore's film Sicko, and he was on stage, and I subsequently made a healthcare film that was very inspired by that, about a famous healthcare activist called Not Going Quietly. And Michael was on stage, he showed Sicko. It's this amazing story about how broken the US healthcare system is.
You write a 20-page paper on it. You're bringing back bad memories.
Oh, you did? Yeah, it's actually, I think it's about film. Somebody got up and was like, Mr. Moore, aren't you just preaching to the choir? We all agree with you here. And he was like, of course I'm preaching to the choir. That's how you get them to sing.
Oh.
And that super hit me like a ton of bricks, which is that the role of some of these films and stories, you're not necessarily trying to convince somebody that lead paint or that conversion therapy is bad. I don't think that's the goal. The goal is what kind of, or class consciousness in Puerto Rico. I think the goal is to build some kind of collective consciousness, action, and solidarity around people who are receptive, but by feeling that empathy are then driven towards some sort of collective hope.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yeah.
something
What
that
I love
I
with
stick
your
with.
messaging when you talk about it, you don't want the viewers necessarily to walk out hating milk, which I do
course.
think there's a lot of storylines where it's kind of like, I'm never going to eat this, I'm never going to drink this ever again after watching this film.
Right.
But you've taken a different direction.
Yeah, the heroes of this story in particular are dairy farmers who are out there milking cows. Of course, I want people to feel empathy for the cows too, which is another factor here. But I think you watch the story of these farmers, and I think that drives you. Your like care and sympathy for them is what's going to ultimately make you feel something about this drink that you drink every day.
Yeah, and farmers don't necessarily have the voice or the platform, and you're allowing them to have this platform to speak. I watched this incredible documentary called Seeds, which is also kind of the farmer background as well, but I do think that that's something that you don't see publicized too often, and it's not really brought to light. So it's just amazing to see each of you doing and dabbling in different projects and different topics, but you're really giving value and a different lens into these topics that maybe not everyone knows about or has even thought to do their research. I always just thought it was milk on the mustache, Nick, and now
you
you've
know.
opened
The more
my
you
eyes.
know.
It's yogurt.
If you take away one thing from today, it was yogurt.
It was yogurt. So we have yogurt in the fridge after everyone. We'll be putting milk mustaches on you. Alan.
I'm still struggling with the roller coaster of like, I'm never gonna eat stuffed crust again, and then I can eat stuffed crust again. So I'm still confused about that, how I feel about stuffed crust. But I think for my project, I'm proud that it's what people don't take away from the film, and it's the fact that I think that a lot of times films get they get shoehorned into like, this is what a Latino story should look like, or when you get the haze if it's in Central America, and there's like these tropes that I'm very proud that the film doesn't lean into those tropes, and it's a really good story. It's really well shot, and I wasn't asked to come in and write a bunch of salsa music for it, so it's just a story, and I love that you can leave from it enjoying a very good film without feeling like I just saw a Puerto Rican film, or I just saw a Hispanic film. There's like these categories that and those are tough because I feel like that's a different choir, and you want to be able to open these stories for other people to be able to enjoy them without feeling like they need any cultural backdrop to be able to appreciate them. So I love that that's not a takeaway, and it shows the island in a different way that I'm very excited about it. So it's not the island that tourists usually see. So I do feel like that's a good takeaway. It's a really good story, and it just happens to look beautiful because of where it was shot.
Beautiful location, very fortunate. I wish I was born in Puerto Rico. I grew up eating pasteles though, that was like my go-to.
Then you're good.
8 hours to make those though,
No
my
cheese
goodness.
in that.
No cheese,
Thank God.
yes, thank goodness, no cheese from the government, exactly. We have just a couple more minutes left. I just wanted to end with asking each of you maybe a highlight moment or something that stood out on each of your projects that's just a memory that you'll never forget.
I think the moment is probably when Merritt Weaver said yes. She kind of got the ball rolling when she said yes. She's a very dear friend of ours, and she's been a friend for a long time. So, there's always that hesitation to ask somebody to do something because you're friends and you don't want to hurt the friendship. But also, like, I was afraid of hurting her. Because when people ask me why I didn't do this role, it's because I can't live through this again. Like, it nearly killed me. So I asked her to do it for me, and I was actually really worried about her living through this. And when she took it on, one of the surprising things, she did say to me too, she's like, Shannon, that's what actors do. We take on tough roles. But one of the things is when I listened to the first episode for the first time with the dialogue all cut together, I found that for the first time I didn't feel alone. And I had somebody who I was very close to, who I loved, who lived what it was like to have a sick child, to be fighting for them so hard, to not be heard, and to sometimes to be made to feel like you're crazy, and just that whole thing is something I'll never forget, and I'll always be grateful, forever grateful to her for that.
So special.
I can go, yeah. The very early in the process, the directors Lorraine and Christian had they're very musical, and they had these references that they brought to the table after I created a couple of suites, which sort of was a different approach to writing the music, and I trusted it blindly. I was like, hey, we'll try it. I'll try to see what comes out of it, and then we can figure out from there. And it sort of was a very, it unlocked like what the score ended up sounding like. It was a very unique voice. It was different for me, and I was very excited that we could collaborate, with even the direction of how the music was composed. And then that allowed me to have the freedom to keep going because we all knew where it came from. So that was very special for me, and I think that also is bring your composer early to the process. This is the panel now. But it was that was very special because when you're early in the process, you can have those conversations. You can experiment. You can come back, and you don't have the pressure of like, hey, here's a project, we have a deadline. And it really opened up a different voice for the film that I felt really comfortable in, and it really tapped into just I also have a band background, so it just made it very natural, and it was something that now I'm a little spoiled. Now I want to work with directors or producers like very early on at that stage to find new ways to approach the music, and that was very key for me.
I feel like the music becomes the DNA of it seeps into the DNA of the project when you come in really early, whereas later it can be like just like a wallpaper. And I think it's literally one of the most powerful tools you can use to tell a story and enhance and do all of this. And when you write suites, it's the best feeling because you have somewhere to pull from and just like keep going.
And you're at home. You're at home. Just like think you have just a script. And there's I think that it's really gratifying when you write something, and maybe the editor's like, oh, that makes me want to change the scene a little bit. And then it comes back to you, and then that is like now you feel like part of the team.
Yeah, literally a part of the team. Exactly.
You don't have to shake everybody's hand and be like, I'm actually the composer.
Exactly. Sorry, who are you?
I had a co-director on The Price of Milk. Yoni Brooks, a longtime collaborator, and it was really a great dynamic to be in the co-director chair for the first time. We also had a great relationship with our composer Dan Deacon, who did a lot of great work. And on the first day of shooting, he was also the DP. He wanted to get a shot like from the milking barn, like from the perspective of the cows at the farmers, and the farmer's like, you really shouldn't go in there. I don't recommend it. And he went in anyway, and he got on by a cow on the farm. And we said,
it's not much to remember.
Yeah, we were like, we're gonna talk about this when the movie gets into a film festival one day, and it's happening right now. So this is that moment that
you only live once. Are you gonna go in there next time?
I am definitely not going in there. So that's the story, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I just want to give a huge thank you, Nick, Shannon, Prateek, and Alain. This was such a fun panel. Thank you as well to all of you for attending this. If we could just give everyone a last round of applause.